Kṛṣṇa Sandarbha Vande Rupa Sanatana Refuge Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī Kṛṣṇa Ekvato namase samannalapati sanim Tadatu chama Uttvadina ganesakaru karunaya Kopina kanthasitau Krishna Kirtana Ganana Tanapano Premamritam Banidhi Dhira Dhira Jana Priyau Priyakarau Nirmatanau Pujitau Śrī Chaitanya Kripa Bharau Bhuvi Bhuva Bharavahantarakam Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghujagam Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī Kṛṣṇa Kirtana Ganana Tanapano Premamritam Banidhi
Kuma Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Adunulambito Bujo Kanakabhadatu Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya Taksho Vishwambaro Dvijabaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataro Vande Śrī Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito Gurudaye Pushpavanto Chitra Sangdo Tamanuno Vandeham Śrī Rāma Krishna Abhayo Charano Sako Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Subalapriyo He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye
Shri Gaudiya Vaishnava Guru Parampara Ki Jai, Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī Ki Jai, Sat Sandarbhas Ki Jai, Anantakota Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Glorious devotees, thank you for coming to another presentation on Śrīla Jīva Gosvāmī's Sat Sandarbhas. We're now in the Kṛṣṇa Sandarbha, and we will continue from our reading of the very beginning of the Kṛṣṇa Sandarbha, wherein Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī presents verse by verse the various avatars as presented in the Śrīmad-Bhagavatam's first canto, third chapter by Sutta Goswami in response to the request of the sages to do so. So he begins, of course, by discussing the first avataric descent, basically the Purusha avatars coming in three features. And he's begun that discussion, and now we're up to the third Anucheta. And Jiva Goswami presents in his third Anucheta the following. Thereafter, Sri Sutta describes the essential nature, swarup, of these two forms, considering them as one in a general sense. That is verily the form of Bhagavan, consisting of extremely potent, or jita, unalloyed being, Visuddha Sattva. The two forms being discussed here are the Purusha avatar Karnadakshay Viṣṇu and Garbhodakshay Viṣṇu. So Jiva Goswami is bringing out the fact that these two manifestations of the Paramatma feature of Bhagavan Śrī Kṛṣṇa, they can be seen in a similar light. So he's going to bring out how that they can be seen as achinta beta beta, simultaneously one and different. And we see that various acharyas, they also refer to the advent of the various avatars as coming from both Karnadakshay Viṣṇu and Garbhodakshay Viṣṇu in different places. So we'll get to that as we go through the presentation one by one of the various avatars that are highlighted in the Bhagavat Purana. Basically, that's what is being presented by Sutta Goswami, is these are the various avatars that Sukadeva Goswami brought to light in his narration of the Bhagavatam to Maharaj Parikshit. So those various avatars are spoken about in different places in the Bhagavatam, and we'll see that as we look at the various Anuchetas and how they highlight where they are in the Bhagavatam in the commentary, and then of course we will come up in due course of time as we go step by step through these avatars and their presentation by Sutta Goswami and representation by Jiva Goswami in this beginning of his Kṛṣṇa Sandarbha, come up to the real key to the matter, which is the Parivas Sutra. So this third Anucheta continues as follows, here again, highlighting the likeness between the two Purushas, the first and second Purushas. The pronoun tat refers to the Purusha form of Śrī Bhagavan. The emphatic particle vai implies that it is well known as such because it manifests from extremely potent unalloyed being, Visuddha Urjita Sattva, and because Bhagavan's potency, Shakti, is non-different from his essential being. Swarup, the form of the Purusha, is indeed Visuddha Sattva. It is also said regarding the second Purusha that his form is identical to his Swarup. O Supreme Lord, I do not regard your essential being, which is purely blissful, free from duality, and of the nature of unobstructed effulgence, to be different from this form of yours. The point Jiva is establishing here is that the Purusha avatars that manifest the material cosmos, the Paramatma feature of the Supreme, is purely spiritual. We could think that it's not purely spiritual, not Visuddha Sattva, because of its manifestation of the the material world itself. So you would think that, you could think that, and that's what's being emphasized here. You don't want to think that the Lord is in any way loses his purity by manifesting the material world, which does have and contain impurity due to the influence of his external Shakti. Jiva Goswāmī continues in this Anucheta. In verse 133, the word Visuddham, unalloyed, means devoid of even a portion of inert matter, it being a manifestation of his Swarup Shakti. Or Jita, extremely potent, means the most powerful of all, because it is the embodiment of supreme bliss, as stated in the Shruti. If this Paramatma were not present in the space of the heart, Akasa, as the personification of bliss, who indeed would breathe? Who would live? Consequently, if the body of the Purusha consists of unalloyed being, how much more must this be so in regards to Svayaṁ Bhagavān himself? So Jiva's really pounding the post here. Let's not misunderstand the supremacy of even this initial descent of divinity that produces and maintains and supports the material manifestation. Some highlights from the commentary stressing this point. The form of Bhagavan is devoid of any tinge of inert matter. Its essence is that of pure Visuddha Sattva, or unalloyed being, which is inherently conscious, whereas the phenomenal Sattva that constitutes Prakriti is inert. The second adjective used is specifying Visuddha Sattva is Orjita, which Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī glosses defines as the most powerful of all, being supremely blissful by nature. It is quite telling that Bhagavan's power is not due primarily to his physical or mental prowess, but because he is intrinsically Ananda. This theme will be elaborated in Priti Sandarbha, and it seems that Jiva Goswāmī has planted a seed here for that future discussion. Very interesting seed to plant in our consciousness, that the topmost manifestation of the Lord's unlimited potencies is this Hladini Shakti, Ananda. He's intrinsically Ananda. And this potency rules all. And of course, the supreme manifestation of that potency is in praying. It is the substance of the loving exchange between the Lord and his devotee. So this is the ruling potency of all. Even as Jiva's pointed out here, when it comes to the material manifestation. And this is carrying forth from the end of the Paramatma Sandarbha, wherein Jiva made it clear that the intent of divinity in the material manifestation, the primary intent is to give further opportunity to devotees who had not completed entirely their full turning of consciousness to Krishna, to the Supreme, in the last course of the material manifestation. So the material manifestation, it's on a clock, so to speak. It punches in and it punches out, like the materialistic worker in the factory. Material nature comes into being, it lasts for a specified duration, and then everything comes to an end. Now, certain purified jivas who have completed their course of purification leave during the manifestation of the material world. Some others who have also completed their course of purification take up residence in the higher echelon planetary systems of a material manifestation, residing there with Brahma and other great sages in those higher planets. And when the material manifestation is wrapped up, they also attain the spiritual realm, Vaikuntha, at that time. So some jivas can leave during a manifestation, some leave at the end of the manifestation, and unfortunately, some are left behind. They did not complete the course of complete turning of consciousness. There was still some alloy, some consciousness that had attachment to the Lord's external energy. So therefore, the Lord, out of his kindness, he's not going to leave them. He's not going to leave them hanging, so to speak. The material manifestation is going to come into being again. And it's interesting, I came across one statement by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. It may be even here copied into the commentary as we go forward, is a statement that the entirety of Brahma's life is less than 1 second in the time of Bhagavan. Less than a second. Nimesha, I think, is the Sanskrit term. So it just kind of gives us a perspective of where we are in the entirety. And also we remember back to the Paramatma Sandarbha, or Bhagavat Sandarbha, I forget which of the two, but there's mention of the infinitesimality of a material manifestation, the whole material manifestation in regards to the Vaikuntha atmosphere. Not that it could be measured, but if it could be measured, the material manifestation itself, both in time, less than a second, and in size or quantity, I think the term is 1/100 billionth or trillionth of the spiritual realm, is the entirety of the material manifestation. So a very small portion, but a small portion that is not neglected by the Lord, as we'll see in the beginning of this Kṛṣṇa Sandarbha, where all the various empowerments and avataric descents of Krishna are elaborated upon, and then they're unpacked as the Bhagavatam further unfolds from this first canto mentioning of the various avatars. Then all these avatars make an appearance later in the text, where their advents are more elaborately discussed. And their contributions to the maintenance and upkeep and infusion of bhakti is more completely revealed. So now we're going to go to the fourth verse, which corresponds to this fourth Anucheta, and we'll see this correlation between the third chapter of the Bhagavatam's first canto, the verses there, and the Anuchetas as we go through this beginning of the Kṛṣṇa Sandarbha. So Jiva's seeing some real significance in pointing out the various avatars leading up to the Parivas Sutra from the same chapter. He brings them all forth and gives some small explanation. And he's basically setting the groundwork for us consciously to be able to have the deepest appreciation for Bhagavan Śrī Kṛṣṇa. That from him so many manifestations are coming for our well-being, for the jiva's well-being while they are in the material world. Why we are entangled here, the Lord is always coming again and again. Yada yada hi dharma sha. In so many ways to maintain us, to support us, to enlighten us. He's manifesting. And these various manifestations will be unpacked more and more going forward here. So Jiva continues, fourth Anucheta, in this way, having described two domains and functions of the Purusha. The true domains, of course, would be the Karna ocean for Karna Viṣṇu and the Garbhodaka ocean within a specific egg-like container for one universe, the Garbhodaka domain there, and the second Purusha, Garbhodaka Viṣṇu. Sutta now explains that his form is of one type only, exactly like his original being, Swarup. So as Sutta is bringing out this likeness between the various Purusha manifestations, which we refer to as Paramatma, and specifically that of Karna Daksha and Garbhodaka Viṣṇu, Jiva is highlighting that. So he then quotes the verse, the fourth verse, the devotional transcendentalists behold with enlightened vision that form of the Purusha, wonderful with thousands of feet, thighs, arms, and faces, possessing thousands of heads, ears, eyes, and noses, and effulgent with the thousands of crowns, garments, and earrings. The pronoun ada, that refers to the form of the Purusha. The compound adabra chakshusha, with enlightened vision, means through the eye of devotion, as Krishna says, O Arjuna, the supreme Purusha is attainable only by exclusive devotion. And also in the Shruti, only devotion leads to him, only devotion reveals him. The Anucheta continues, out of these two manifestations of the Purusha, the first having thousands of feet and so on, was delineated in Paramatma Sandarbha, second Anucheta. Referring to the form of the second Purusha, Sri Maitreya said in the 8th chapter of the 3rd canto, by his shapely arms, he excels the bamboos that were like the arms of that emerald mountain, and by his beautiful legs, he cast aside the splendor of the trees constituting its legs. I'm going to continue the Anucheta before we discuss some of these points. Also in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, third canto, with his pair of stout arms adorned with precious armlets and gems, and the thousands of crowns that adorned the hoods of Bhagavan Sesha appeared like peaks of gold. I'm sorry, I'll reread that. The thousands of crowns that adorned the hoods of Bhagavan Sesha appeared like peaks of gold. Additionally, in the 14th chapter of the 9th canto, Sri Sukha said, Atri, who was equal to his father in qualities, was the son of Brahma, who took birth from the lotus sprouted from the navel leg of the thousand-headed Purusha. So we can see that Sutta Goswami, by these statements in regards to the Purusha avatars, is bringing the consciousness to this, to an understanding of the Purusha, or the Paramatma feature of Bhagavan. He's bringing an understanding in a twofold way. First fold is that this manifestation can be fully appreciated and understood only through devotion, through bhakti. And second is the fact that he's starting to bring out the personal characteristics of these two forms of the Purusha, because there's much to be said about the Purusha in the scriptures, which would lead one to see the Purusha as being not wholly transcendental, so to speak. In other words, this Virat conception has to be seen properly. It's a tool. It's not a true representation. It's a representation of divinity, but it's not ontological reality. The Lord, we can see that so many things of the world around us, we can see in relationship to the Lord. We can see, the various planetary systems sitting on this Virat Purusha as its legs, thighs, chest, head, various levels of the planetary system, various levels of human society and the functions of the jivas in human society according to their qualifications can be seen in relationship to the Virat Purusha. The various demigods and their functions can also be seen similarly in regards to that Purusha. But here, Sutta, and further reinforced by Jiva in the Sandarbhas, is bringing us to seeing these two manifestations of the Purusha, the first and the second, as completely pure Suddha Sattva manifestations of divinity, not in any way contaminated or touched by the energy that springs forth from them that manifests both the first creation, Sarga, and the second creation, Visarga, which is coming from the Brahma growing from the navel of the second Purusha. So again, although this Virat conception can be somewhat helpful to the yogi in aligning their consciousness to seeing divinity in the world around them in so many ways, let us not forget the true nature of even this manifestation of the Lord, the Paramatma feature. And as we've discussed, that this particular manifestation of Bhagavan that creates the material universe. I lost my train of thought, excuse me. So we will continue here. Some commentary from this fourth Anucheta. In the verse from the third chapter, Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī describes the domain and function of the first Purusha, Mahavishnu and Kṛṣṇa Viṣṇu. In the next two verses, he explains the function and sphere of action of the second Purusha, Garbhodakṣaya Viṣṇu. Now, in the present verse, he describes Vishnu's form. The question arises, which of the Vishnu forms is being portrayed? Is it that of the first or the second Purusha? Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī addresses this question in the present Anucheta. So really, the way Sutta discussed in the Bhagavatam, he presented this verse, we could question which Purushas he's talking about. He replies that the form of both the Purushas is the same. They are identical in form. So again, this turning of consciousness to the Gaudiya perspective regarding even the Purusha manifestations based upon the new Praman of the Gaudiyas, the Bhagavat Purana. So this all gets into the establishment of the underlying understanding of divinity as put forth by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and as canonized, as completely elaborated upon by the six Goswamis and the other immediate followers of Sri Chaitanya, who are the architects of our sampradaya. They've taken all the scriptures and they've churned the essence so that they could bring out the highlights of the Bhagavat Purana in such a way as to put forth the entirety of Krishna's most intimate love for his most intimate devotees. So it's not that Krishna comes alone, and it's not that in the Bhagavatam he is presented as being alone. So we have to gradually build the groundwork which allows us entrance into those understandings. Continuing on to the fifth Anucheta. In this regard, in order to clearly describe Śrī Bhagavan, Śrī Sutta discloses the characteristics of the second Purusha, situated in the Garbhodak ocean, as being the source of the innumerable avatars. So here it's Jiva's bringing out a perspective that all of the other avatars are coming forth through the second Purusha. And that does make sense to us within a particular universe, universal shell. The Garbhodakṣaya Viṣṇu, the second Purusha, is there and is the avenue for the descent or the manifestation of all the various avataric descents within a universe. So from the Bhagavatam, the verse reads, the fifth verse, this form of the Purusha, Garbhodakṣaya Viṣṇu, is the repository and imperishable seed of innumerable avatars. It is by a portion of his portion that the devas, human beings, and other forms of life are all brought forth. The pronoun itat, this, refers to the form of the Purusha situated within the universe, Brahmanda. The word nidanam, repository, means the eternal shelter, as the ocean is for all smaller bodies of water. Therefore, he is the imperishable avyayam, seed, bijam, meaning the inexhaustible abode of origination. He is the seed not only of the avatars, but also of the living beings, as stated in the second half of the verse. So there's some extensive commentary here. So we're speaking of Garbhodakshai, Vishnu, the second Purusha, and in the Chaturvyuha, Pradyumna. So the second Purusha is the source of various types of avatars. Now this commentary is very important for our understanding, so please follow along attentively. The definition of an avatar is given by Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī. When the above mentioned forms of Bhagavan appear as if without precedent, for the sake of cosmic operations, either directly or through a medium, they are called avatars. From the Lagu Bhagavatamrita. Now we go into how to look to the various manifestations of Svayaṁ Bhagavān Śrī Kṛṣṇa. Previous to this definition, again, the framework for Gaudiya Vaishnavism is being established by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's immediate followers. Previous to this definition, Sri Rupa writes that Śrī Kṛṣṇa, the original form of Bhagavan, exists in three forms in the spiritual abodes. So prior to this definition in the discussion of avatars, Rupa has explained in his Lagu Bhagavatamrita the manifestations and expansions of Śrī Kṛṣṇa in the spiritual realm. These three forms are called Swayam Rupa, Tad Ekatma Rupa, and Avesh. Swayam Rupa is Krishna himself. Tad Ekatma Rupa forms are different in appearance from Krishna, although non-different from him in their essential being, Swarup. These are further subdivided into Vilas and Swamsa forms. What's further divided? This Tad Ekatma Rupa form. Same as Krishna in their essential being, but they come in two varieties. And those two varieties are divided into categories of Vilas and Swamsa forms. The Vilas forms are almost as powerful as Krishna, but Swamsa forms have a little less power. So they have this, in essence, the same sense of self, but some are more and some are less powerful. Vasudeva and Matsya are examples of these two categories, respectively. Avesh forms refers to Bhagavan's creation of specifically highly enlightened jivas with some particular aspect of his potency. Examples of this type are Narada, who's empowered with bhakti, and the Kumaras, who are infused with gyan. These three forms exist in the spiritual abodes, and they are indicated in the above verse by the phrase the above mentioned forms, purvokta. the commentary continues, and it's very, very enlightening here to understand these manifestations, how Krishna expands. In Laghu Bhagavatamrita, the adverbial phrase for the sake of cosmic operations, Visva Karyatam, can mean either for manifesting the universes as affected by Mahavishnu, or for some function within the universe, such as uprooting the unrighteous or blessing a devotee. Appearing directly, Swayam means to manifest without taking birth from parents, as in the case of Matsya and Varaha. Appearing through a medium, Dvarantarena, means to take birth through parents, as in the case of Rāma and Krishna. These avatars are further classified as the three types, namely Purusha avatars, Guna avatars, and Lila avatars. The avatars of Bhagavan are usually of the Swamsa and Avesh varieties. Summarized from Bhagavan, Laghu Bhagavatamrita. In the third chapter of the first canto, which is what we're studying here with Jiva in his Sandarbha, Sutta Goswami gives a list of prominent avatars to establish the identity of the original form of Bhagavan. In the verse under discussion, he says that the avatars appear from the Purusha and then return back into him. It is for this reason that the Purusha is designated both as the source, bija, and the resting place, nidana, of the avatars. This is stated as such because an avatar descends for the sake of universal operations, and the Purusha is the originator as well as the sustainer of the universes. Now we begin our step-by-step discussion, but I think what's significant here from this little bit of commentary is that he gives, it's mentioned here, Sutta Goswami gives a list of prominent avatars to establish the identity of the original form of Bhagavan. It's an interesting way to look at it that's been presented here in this commentary, that the purpose, the reasoning behind Sutta Goswami's step-by-step presentation in this third chapter of the avatars and the Bhagavatam's presentation of those avatars step-by-step throughout the first 9 cantos leading up to the face of divinity, Śrī Kṛṣṇa, in the 10th canto. It's all to establish the prominence of the original form of the Supreme Lord, Śrī Kṛṣṇa. So Krishna is the source of the Leela avatars. And we begin with the listing of the avatars. Now these are, without going into the specific Leelas, and which are completely elaborated in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in various places, which those locations are here in the presentation. This will be a superficial overview of the descents of the Lord. And it's also explained, although they come and they're given some numerical designation, even by Sutta Goswami himself, that designation does not in any way signify the chronology of their advent in the time of the material universe. So the first avatar, the Kumars. Jiva writes, thereafter, while describing at length the avatars of the Purusha, Śrī Sita in the next 20 verses enumerates the appearances of the portions, amsa, of the Purusha, and the whole, amsi, who encompasses them with the intention of disclosing their oneness. Oneness, of course, in this regard would be their oneness of intent, and of course, their oneness in that they are all completely spiritual manifestations or completely empowered manifestations of the spiritual potencies of the Lord. So the sixth Anucheta, corresponding with the sixth verse of the third chapter of the first canto, that very supreme deity, Deva, first manifesting himself as the four Kumaras, assumed the form of Brahmanas and underwent the formidable vow of perpetual celibacy. Little commentary here. Well, we'll read on in the Anucheta. Jiva continues. He who reposes on the Garbhodak ocean and whose form consists of thousands of feet and so on is that very supreme deity, Deva, known as the Purusha. This fact is also corroborated by the concluding statement of this section. All of these avatars are either portions, amsa, or partial expansions, kala, of the Purusha, pumsa. That's from the 28th verse of this very chapter. The word Kumaram means in the form of the four Kumara brothers. The word Brahma means becoming Brahmanas. So some interesting insights in this commentary. The Kumars are four brothers named Sanat, Sanandana, Sanaka, and Sanatan. Although four, they are counted as one because they are always together, not only physically, but in awareness. They are the first sons of Brahma and are thus part of the secondary creation, Visarga. They are the founders of the Kumar Sampradaya, properly known as the Sampradaya in the present day. The Kumars are examples of Avesh avatars. Of course, we know Avesh means that they are empowered by a specific Shakti of the Lord. And in the case of the Kumars, that Shakti is the Shakti of knowledge, spiritual awareness. Bhagavan's first avatar as the Kumars signifies that it is only by devotion to Bhagavan, Brahmacharya, absolute reality, Brahma, and conduct, Charya, that one can transcend the preoccupation with sexual thought, which keeps one in the material world. So, of course, we could say Brahmacharya refers to a strict vow of celibacy, which, of course, the Kumars exhibited, so much so that they did not even want to mature in their physical forms to a stage of puberty where there would even be the question of having sexual inclination or thoughts thereof. So Brahmacharya, of course, can be viewed in that light, and that certainly is one of the specific requirements for Gyan realization, very strict discipline. But there is another way to look at the term Brahmacharya. It means whose consciousness is turned towards absolute reality. And their conduct within the material world supports that turning of consciousness. So that's also the more applicable definition when it comes to the insights of our tradition. We're not, although there are certainly many very renounced brahmacharis and sannyasis in the 4 stages of sannyas within our sampradaya. And these individual devotees are extremely knowledgeable. We do not limit ourselves simply. That's not the primary qualification for carrying forward our sampradaya. The primary qualification is spiritual knowledge. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself spoke to this specifically, that Kibra Nyasi, that this kind of renunciation you can have, or you could even be Sudra. But the main qualification is you have to have knowledge of Krishna, and that qualifies you to carry forth this my sampradaya. So Kiba Vivripra, Kiba Nyase, Sudra Kabinaya, E Krishna Tattva Veda, E Guru Haya. So the main focus there is the knowledge of Krishna. So even the Sudra with knowledge of Krishna can become the guru of Krishna. Bhakti. Continuing on to the 7th verse and Anucheta. When the earth had fallen into the depths of Rasatala, the Lord of sacrifice assumed the 2nd avatar in the form of the divine boar Varaha to uplift the earth so that the world could prosper. The pronoun asya means of the world, and bhavaya means for its progress. In his 3rd avatar, that very Purusha, Garbhodakṣayi Viṣṇu, assumed the disposition of a seer. Now we're going on to the next Anucheta. 3rd avatar, assuming the disposition of a seer, a rishi, as the celestial sage Sri Narada propagated the Sattvata Vaishnav Tantra, by which freedom from bondage to action, Naishkarmya, is attained through means of action. This 8th Anucheta continues. And Jiva writes, the Purusha assumed the disposition of a seer, rishi, and among such seers, he specifically accepted the form of a celestial sage, Sri Narada. The word Sattvatam means Vaishnav, and Tantram here refers to the Pancharatra. And Agama literature, the word Karmanam, through means of action, implies that although dharma performed for the sake of Sri Bhagavan is also of the form of action, by that yata, or in other words, by action according to the Sattvata Tantra, one attains Naiskarmya. because naishkarmya liberates one from bondage to karma. It is hence the state of freedom from karma. It merely appears to be non-different from karma. It is to be added to the sense of the complete, is to be added to the verse to complete the sense. So it appears like karma, these actions that are taken in according and in following the tantra, the pancharatra that Sri Narada gave us for our devotional practice, all how we perform actions for the pleasure of Krishna without any sense of or any inclination to self-aggrandizement in any way. So there are certain ways that we can form an image of the Lord from material nature. We can worship that form, and we can, through that worship, deepen our devotion and appreciation for the Supreme Lord. We can perform various sacrifices for the betterment of our devotion, makes certain vows. So all this is in the Tantra or the Agama literature, all these specifics of action, which one could take for karma, but what Narada gave us in our Pancharatra is similar, gave us sacrifices and actions which are all for advancement in bhakti. And they may look like some of the same sacrifices that are performed in the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. So many actions are there, and it may appear, but Jiva Goswami's making it clear in this Anucheta that that's not what Narada's Pancharatra is about. This is all naishkarmya, and that means that it is all free of anything that would further bind us in karma through action. There's a couple pages of commentary here, and I will read them quickly. There's some interesting points, and we will then conclude today's presentation. The Vaishnavas are also called Sattvatas, and thus the Sattvata Tantra means Vaishnav Tantra. It refers to the body of scripture called Pancharatra Agama. The Vedas are called Nigama, and the Tantras are known as Agama. There are three divisions of Tantra, namely Vaishnav, Shaiva, and Sakta. Vaishnav Tantras are properly known as Pancharatra Agama, Pancharatra, or simply Agama. The story of the appearance of the Pancharatra Agama is narrated by Bhishma in the 335th chapter of the Santi Parva of the Mahabharata. The karmas or ritual acts prescribed in the Pancharatra Agama are also a type of karma action, but they are not the cause of bondage. This is so because they are undertaken exclusively for the pleasure of Bhagavan, without any sense of doership and without seeking any form of reward. They are therefore called naishkarmya, or freedom from bondage to karma. The word tantra comes from the root tan, meaning to spread. Consequently, tantra is a scripture that extends knowledge. Tantra is a storehouse of mysticism theology, philosophy, and religious principles, discussing the origin of the cosmos, the purpose of human life, the socio-religious system of varnashram, the significance of samskaras, the practice of yoga, and so on. Bhagavan Viṣṇu is the principal deity of the Vaishnava Tantra. It deals with the process of worship, meditation, the rules of temple architecture, descriptions of the yoga pit, worship of Tulsi, types of devotion, and various procedures and rules of devotion. That takes us up to the next Anucheta, which we will dive into in our next discussion. I'll take a look here at the messages. No questions there. If anybody has a question, I will attempt to answer it. If not, I will thank you so much for your association. Vanchakalpatubhischa, Kripasindubheva-cha, Patitanam, Pavanebhyo Vaishnavejo, Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna.
Śrī Chaitanya Kripa Bharao